Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scott Pollock, Chief Editor of the Critical Post Chicago, reporting. Welcome to another edition of the Goldwater Report. Thanks for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for another edition. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to say that because I'm my own video mix director today, this is generally a two-person job, but sometimes the transitions can be a little slow, so I want you to bear with me as I work both ends of the spectrum, having to sit in front of the camera and also to perform the camera direction or the video mix direction at the same time. So it might get a little hairy, but please forgive me for that. I don't have an assistant today during this recording of this broadcast submission. Ladies and gentlemen, this particular broadcast submission is an interim update because of some things that have arisen after our last couple of submissions regarding the Keenan internet fraud, which is also an information fraud being perpetrated by a number of individuals that aid Mr. Keenan in his effort. The primary suspects there, or the primary perpetrators there, are David Wilcock and Benjamin Fulford. And anybody who's been watching this and has been catching the stories, most people that are awake regard these two other characters as clowns, and one, for certain, is an egomaniac. Ladies and gentlemen, we have in our possession every email between Ms. Jean Haynes and Mr. Keenan. We have every Skype text message between those two individuals. And we also have in our possession, and we got this last Friday, every recorded conversation over Skype between Jean Haynes and Neil Keenan. And there's a lot of material to go through. It is quite a slog, I can tell you that. There are hundreds of hours of recordings that we're listening to, and we are inspecting every word spoken. Every word. And there are so many nuances that Mr. Keenan was using to game not only Ms. Haynes, but everybody else watching him, that we're going to pay careful attention to all these nuances, and we're going to bring them forward as part of the evidence of this fraud. The evidence of the fraud is being gathered. How the nature of the conversations have been twisted by Mr. Keenan's subsequent split from Ms. Jean Haynes is becoming clearer. But there is still much work to be done. This is going to take a bit more time than we realized. we had no idea of how much material there would be to inspect and review and to apply the forensics in this investigation. We'll explain in detail many of these things in the final broadcast submission after it's been assembled to reveal the facts as relates to the report. Ladies and gentlemen, I can state unequivocally, after having listened to over 60 recordings to date, and there are 4 discs, we're only still slogging our way through the first disc, that Mr. Keenan deceived Ms. Jean Haynes, and she was in way over her head in believing anything this man had to say. She put way too much faith in the research of David Wilcock's work, Financial Tyranny, because she was a fan of David Wilcock's other works, thinking that if he did such a good job in that wheelhouse, how could he not do a good job with this? And that's what led her to believe David Wilcock. So she didn't question Wilcock's work, and Wilcock didn't do his homework well enough about Mr. Neil Keenan, or actually what kind of character this man was. I am now a witness to that. I have every nuance of the conversations. Let's listen for a bit here on how Keenan was baiting Ms. Jean Haynes. And when I mean baiting, I mean that this is the way that Mr. Keenan was keeping the promise of money in front of her nose while she was lending Mr. Keenan all that cash. And we'll get into that in the accounting in a little bit. And we have accounted for every single dime, to include any refunds that Mr. Keenan alleges. And it's over $300,000. And we have a copy of every single receipt. And we know where the money was spent, what dates this money was spent on. It's a lot of money, ladies and gentlemen. And why would anybody just give away money like that without the promise of something in return? Nobody believes that. Anyways, I want you to listen to how he was baiting Ms. Jean Haynes in this conversation dated March 27th, 2013 at 9:03 in the morning Pacific time. Listen to these fantastic numbers. We've got several of these on file at present, and I am only on clip number 60 of what we determined to be well over 300 on file. There are, like I said earlier, 4 discs. We're still on disc 1. Cut away and bring this up for you. Listen to this. It starts at, on this particular recording, at 05 and 40 seconds. Listen to this. He's talking about a guy by the name of Inchul, I-N-C-H-U-L, in this. And allegedly a man from South Korea who was there that was going to help him broker some bonds to some South Koreans and thereby attain $1 million. Listen to this.
Yeah, I hear you.
You know, but I talked to him, so we'll do the first $1 million as soon as I get it. 2 days later, he'll have the money in his hand 2 days after I get it. And and after that we'll do another million almost immediately, and that way there's a little more cash on the table. And after that, we might even do a couple of $2 million deals. Well, if Naylor's going to be out by then, when Naylor's out, we can go immediately to the 100 million with Chris.
Okay. And is Chris coming in? Have you talked to him about that yet?
I'm not talking to Chris at all until Naylor's out.
Okay.
I'm not talking to any of them at all because I don't want them running around here and screwing things up.
No.
Isn't that amazing? You want to hear it again? Yeah, I'll play it for you again, so you get the flavor of this and you don't have to keep on going back in the video. Starting at 0540.
I hear you.
You know, but I talked to Ocho. We'll do the first million as soon as I get it. 2 days later, because he'll get the money in his hand 2 days after I get it, and after that we'll do another million almost immediately, and that way there's a little more cash on the table. And after that, we might even do a couple of $2 million deals. Well, if Naylor's going to be out by then, when Naylor's out, we can go immediately to the 100 million with Chris.
Okay.
With Chris, he mentions Chris. And he keeps on talking about brokering more. I'll explain what that all means in part 2. You'll be very surprised with the evidence that we have, which explains the whole nature of Mr. Keenan's gig. He's always talking about the next deal. It's always the next deal. Have you noticed that it's always 2 weeks away with Drake Bailey? Have you noticed that as soon as we get our financing, X is going to happen? It's always about the next deal, ladies and gentlemen. How many deals is it going to take to free the world? Ladies and gentlemen, we've got another edit coming up here. And I can also state unequivocally that we continue to gather evidence regarding Wilcock's fantasy called financial tyranny, and that Wilcock's work in this area is basically poorly researched and uninformed because he doesn't understand this stuff. He doesn't understand what kind of dealer that Mr. Keenan is, or what kind of dealing he is doing. I doubt David Wilcock would understand the talking of a deal if his life depended on it, to use an old adage. Isn't information as well isn't as good as he attests. He's in way over his head. He doesn't know anything at all about what he's talking about. Just because he speaks the English language and hears the words, he doesn't understand the nuances of being a broker or going from one deal to the next deal and how all of this is going to flush out. He doesn't explain that in Financial Tyranny. So the entire treatise is completely misleading because he doesn't understand the context. Let's listen to him cheerlead. Let me bring up a window here. We're going to listen to Mr. Keenan cheerlead for David Wilcock. Let me see if I've got the right edit here.
David did a fantastic job, and you have no idea how much work he did to get this out to you. I mean, I was there every day giving him a hand, so I know what David did. David worked, which is what David does well. He likes to work.
He was there every day giving him a hand, instructing David as to how he wanted to construct his yarn, his fraud. And David just sat there and lapped it up like, you know, a cat with fresh cream. He didn't know what he was listening to. He thought this man was going to save the world. But let's talk about the how well his research is done, right? Let's talk about that for a second. Here's a photo. I want you to see it. Here's a photo that's part of his financial tyranny expose that's in the web archive pages describing the Russian TV expose called Financial Tyranny, done on Ren TV, that he was so proud of. Interesting how the Russians wanted to float this out there, considering right now that the ruble has been delisted from the Forex monetary exchanges and oil has bottomed out. Ren TV, kind of like RT News in the United States of America. But here's a photo. Let's take a look at this, okay? This is a photo that he used on Financial Tyranny. You can see up here. If you can't see it well enough, I've got it magnified it for as much, but this is off the Internet Archive web Wayback Machine. DivineCosmos.com, David's blogs. Start here, David's blog, 1097-Russian TV. That's the URL. You can see it. And you'll take a look at this photo. You see 5 boxes here. Okay? See these boxes? And you see down here a date. And if you can't read it because of the rendering engine on the video software, if you can't read it, it says 01/01/2010. As if this is a recent photo. I don't know where he got it. I don't know who put that there. I don't know if Mr. Wilcock put that there. I don't think David Wilcock knew who took the photo, or that he researched the photo and sourced it correctly. Had he done that, he would have come up with this. This photo, now I want you to see the hand on top of the boxes here. Let's take a look at Mr. Wilcock's photo. See the hand on top of the boxes, same color background. And here's the hand again, only cropped a little bit differently. Only instead of 5 boxes, there are about 10. Let's see. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 boxes, excuse me. 6 boxes. But notice over here on the left part of the screen, you'll see a date, 1/23/2004, or actually in order, 23-1-2004, which is January 23rd, 2004. This comes from Paul Collin and his archives. And it was on unwanted publicity intelligence, with Mr. Wilcock names in his book as having been responsible for somebody's death or some crazy notion like that, which is a preposterous claim, and that's like in the first 10 pages. Preposterous claim. All that aside, this is the original photo. Now, where did Paul Collin get this photo? I'm going to let you hear how he explains where he got this photo. But I'm also going to tell you that this photo was obtained by a woman, which is up here in the file, by a woman who, and what you see on the screen here is a passport for the South Africa National Intelligence Agency. She's an NIA operative. The name Janine Treblanche. She obtained this while on an excursion with somebody in the Philippines. and somebody had taken that photo, and she brought this photo back. But I'm going to let Mr. Collin, explain this to you. Let me get this out of the way. Listen to this.
Sukarno phony UBS certificates. What we're talking about are Federal Reserve notes. I have pictures of these treasure chests of that say Federal Reserve note from a gentleman in Turkey. Reams of photos from him that you'll see one or two pictures of on David Wilcock's site. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I can rock and roll with photos, but I find it interesting that photos linked to an intelligence operation that I was involved with on the periphery back in 2004 when I was in Eastern Europe wound up on David Wilcock's site.
Now let's listen to Mr. Keenan talk about this again. Let's listen to it one more time. I want to make sure you understand how Keenan loves to spin things, because he's a promoter, see. He's always talking about the deal. And people are enamored with him. I don't know why. But he seems to have a certain amount of personal magnetism to some people. Certainly not me. I'd see this palooka coming 10 miles away. And if he was trying to buy something from me, I'd make money on him. But let's listen, okay?
Putting it in the form of a book. David did a fantastic job, and you have no idea how much work he did to get this out to you. I mean, I was there every day giving him a hand. So I know what David did. David worked, which is what David does well. He likes to work. Okay? Now, there was no Michael, so forget that. You got your timeline mixed up. Your lie got caught up again. Now let's go to the...
I'm going to get to that point in a second. I wanted to play it through that particular part. But I want to get to the next point. We'll get to Mr. Dunn in a second. Ladies and gentlemen, the amount of meanderings that I have to go through in order to make a coherent report line regarding the way and the nature that this information fraud and monetary fraud has been perpetrated, because of the amount of deception and deceit involved is quite amazing. But I want to get to another point. We'll get back to Mr. Dunn in a second. I wanted to get to another point about Mr. Drake Bailey. This man is I don't know why Keenan, who's trying to say he's doing something legitimate, would have a man like this, other than the fact that he's a good guy to Mr. Keenan. I don't know why. I mean, this guy, people listen to this Drake Bailey on something called Blog Talk Radio, the Drake Update, which was the blown out of proportion way early on in this whole thing. And the guy rambles on for 3 hours and doesn't say more than, I don't know, 2 or 3 points. It takes 3 hours for him to make 3 points. I've never heard anything like it. Most people can't get through 10 minutes. I can't get through it. In the beginning, when we first heard about this whole thing, I listened to this stuff. And that's why I told you in the last video, we dropped this 2 years ago. Because it was all a bunch of garbage. But people are entertained. Well, that's a problem with being entertained by alternative media, because alternative media doesn't do its job properly. And the major media corporate conglomerates, of course, this is an aside, but the major media corporate conglomerates do the best job they can at lying in plain view. Anyways, let's take a look at what Mr. Bailey put on his website, AmericanNationalMilitia.com. Okay, cut away here. He got a little ruffled, obviously, by a couple of our reports. We don't know, but maybe somebody told him about our reports in the work that we were doing here. Whatever the case may be that caused this man to write this on his blog, AmericanNationalMilitia.com, and he's not a very good writer. Posted on, called Update, posted on January 25th, 2015. And by the way, Mr. Bailey likes to use this blog to try and make money. I got other points to make about that. He goes on, he said, I have decided to offer a report that only officials know about. What a conflation that is. I feel our listeners have a right to know. Quote, last Sunday in the late afternoon, I got a call. Very few who know me would call on Sunday, so I took the call. Much to my surprise, it was a representative of the office of the Attorney General of the state of Illinois. I was asked about an investigation they were conducting, people involved, actions these people had or were taking, and whom all I might know in regards to this case. He's talking about a case being lodged by the Illinois State's Attorney General's office. I want to make that clear. He goes on to say, quote, the details were about the following list of people. Tom Sims, Gene Haynes, he spells Gene's name wrong. He spells my name wrong, Scott Pollock, Deb Martindale, and several others. And things going on in other states and countries. He goes on to say, to be blunt, I was on the phone for about an hour and a half and quite surprised at the detail. In order to help, I decided to cooperate and answered all their questions and send archives of things I have. He's got archives, dossiers. Perhaps he's trying to imitate Paul Cullen. Oh, Jean's living in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada, and he says illegally. Well, if she was there illegally, she would have been kicked out. Then he picks on this poor kid, Tom Sims. And I don't know anything about Tom Sims. But he says, living in his mother's basement. He sounds like he's trumpeting this other idiot on Blog Talk that interviews him every week, Tom Williams. Tom Sims living in his mother's basement, hacking, etc. Sims has caused so much trouble his mother is selling the house. Now, how would they know that? That's one of Tom Williams' little vignettes there. But Drake thought he'd plagiarize it. Some sort of fraud in Cyprus that is still being investigated, etc. And if you'll recall, that's when Neil Keenan sent out an email looking for money, saying Western Union him in Cyprus. And allegedly, this kid who's living in his basement according to Keenan in that particular clip, and I didn't go search for that, flew to Cyprus to impersonate Neil Keenan so that he could pick up the money that Neil Keenan asked for in an email. And as a matter of fact, I got that email too, because I'm on Mr. Keenan's email list, because I have asked him continually, not continually, that's a conflation. I asked him on 3 or 4 occasions to come onto this broadcast platform, explain himself, come under the light of cold, hard questions. I figured if he could do that, he might actually have something legit. But he goes on to say in this, after that Cyprus statement, Pollock was involved in the defamation, so he is being checked as to any involvement with the ex-members group and other things. Martindale came up as a person of interest along with Otto. The investigator asked about a very long list of names I didn't know. Really? You don't know something? He didn't know something, ladies and gentlemen? The man on Blog Talk Radio that has an answer for everything didn't know something? And people, he goes on to say, and people, activities in California and other states as well. I was told that everyone who was involved had their computers hacked and that they had enough information on everyone. It seems that there are electronic records that are kept, that are made available in an investigation like this one, even if someone cleans their computer. I did ask about Denise, referring to Denise Rednauer, and they are very aware of everything she did, but we're not real interested so far. So he wanted to throw Denise a little quip there. Ladies and gentlemen, that's one of the most ridiculous statements from somebody who calls himself a credible source of information that you could possibly listen to if you knew about the whole saga. And you had actually been stupid enough to follow this man that long. But no. Tell you what. Let's listen to a call I made to the Illinois State's Attorney General's office. Listen to this.
Attorney General Lisa Madigan's office.
Hi, how are you? She said this is Lisa Madigan's office. That's Michael Madigan, the House Speaker, the very powerful House Speaker of the Illinois State Legislature. Been in office for 30 years. That's his daughter, Lisa Madigan. So I'm calling Lisa Madigan's office. And this is constituent services. But you'll hear that in a second. Let's go and listen to more.
I'm fine. How are you?
Good, thank you. My name is Scott Pollock, and I'm trying to find out something in terms of what the state's attorney does. Does the state's attorney's office handle defamation of character charges?
Are you talking about the state's attorney or the attorney general? They're separate people.
Well, I'm being referred here over from the attorney the attorney general's office because they couldn't answer my question.
Okay.
So does the state's attorney?
You're still at the attorney general's office.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Well, that's what they gave me this number, so I'm trying to find out at this number under the purview. Well, what part of the attorney general's office have I?
This is you have constituent services right now.
Okay, good. That's what they told me it was going to be.
Okay.
Does the Illinois State Attorney General's office handle defamation of character charges?
We represent the state of Illinois. So unless you're suing a state agency, We would not be involved in the case at all. Do you see what I'm saying? We do not represent individual people.
Oh,
We
okay.
only represent the state of Illinois.
Oh, well, that handles the whole line of questioning then. So if somebody called and made a complaint about an individual, they wouldn't. Your office wouldn't be handling an investigation on that, would they?
No, I wouldn't think so. Not unless the state was somehow involved in the case. Not unless the state of Illinois was somehow involved in the case. They would not. No.
Okay, so if somebody called and complained saying, somebody's defamating my character or whatever, you would not handle that complaint?
No, you would not.
Oh,
no.
Okay. Well, that explains a lot to me, because there's somebody online saying that they're spreading rumors. And I was implicated. My name is Scott Pollack. I run the Critical Post Chicago, which is an online newspaper blog. And it's being rumored that the Illinois State's Attorney General's office called an individual who said he has a complaint on a week ago this last Sunday. And that the Illinois State's Attorney General's investigator's office had called him. And it's like, no, you wouldn't call, an investigator wouldn't call a person making a complaint about another individual.
No, we would not from our office. Okay. I mean, it would have to be, like I said, it would have to be a case that's involving some state agency, because that's who we would represent, or like a state official, like the governor, or someone involved with the state, but not.
Yeah, you're not in other words, you're not a plaintiff's attorney for any particular person in the public.
We always defend.
We're defending the state.
Or we could bring a suit, for the state against something.
For the state.
But it would be for the state only, not for some individual.
Right. So the state would have to have a vested interest. Right.
The state would have to have an interest.
Well, that explains a great deal to me. Thank you very much. You are constituent services for the Illinois State's Attorney General, right?
That's right.
All right,
constituent services, yes.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking my call.
Okay, no problem.
All right. Bye-bye.
Well, I'd like to make an announcement, ladies and gentlemen. I hope Mr. Bailey has that investigator's phone number, since he's such an important person. I would like to have that investigator that Mr. Bailey talked to call 312-544-0134. Or Mr. Bailey, call 312-544-0134 and give me the investigator's name. I'll call him. I'd be more than happy to help him with his investigation. Whoever it is. Ladies and gentlemen, what kind of ego does it take to continue a charade like this? How many different ways do people have to watch this man fumble over himself before they stop listening to him? One of Keenan's boys. All right. But that's the facts, ladies and gentlemen. The Illinois State's Attorney General's office doesn't perform investigations about anything on behalf of one individual for another. They defend the state of Illinois. And the state of Illinois has to have a vested interest. You heard it. That's the explanation of what any particular attorney general from any state does. And I knew the answer to the question. I was not scared of anything. But I wanted just to show Mr. Bailey how stupid he is. Or show the audience exactly how insulting this man is. Ladies and gentlemen, the only thing that these men can do to keep their fraud afloat is attack the investigation and the folks who see through the game being played. That's all they've got. No facts, just attacks, which is a very common ploy, especially when you're trying to cheerlead a fraud. The best offense is more offense. They pile it on so thick it's ridiculous. And anybody that's paying attention to anything that they're saying in terms of the facts of what they had said, not facts that they are alluding to, but just the fact of what they're saying. And if they follow the line, they cross themselves up time and time again. Next, we're going to look at what Mr. Keenan posted a couple days ago. But before we show you some of these statements, we'd like to alert you to body language that detects the lie being told by the subject. There are two well-known telltale signs. The first one is called mouth guarding. The second one is called nose touching. You can find this search by doing the research and looking it up on the internet using the search terms body language in quotes, put a space after it, and then in quotes put face touching. Again in quotes. When you use both of these search strings together when performing the query, you will turn up myriads of sites informing you about this. Both of these unconscious gestures occur when the deception stimulates a nervous reaction that unconsciously can't be overcome by the subject. We're going to watch Mr. Keenan perform these gestures while offering his spin, trying to explain his way out of a situation that this report, and probably others, is putting him in by naming him as a person committing international wire fraud on Ms. Jean Haynes and others. Here, there's some, I heard that there was, you send in $250, they're going to return $1 million to you. We'll get into that later. You got a screen capture of that. Ladies and gentlemen, make no mistakes. Miss Jean Haynes is attacking Mr. Keenan. This publication is performing an investigation about this fraud. Mr. Keenan has the gall to act like an injured party? Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make it very clear. Miss Jean Haynes is not paying me to do this. We were asked to do this. After listening to the story about what happened to Miss Jean Haynes, I decided to spend my money to do the proper job in investigating it. We're doing this at our publication. I can assure you, Miss Jean Haynes can't pay me a dime to do this. I'm not a licensed private investigator, but I have a couple in tow. This costs money. Like I told you, we have the receipts in total. Anytime Mr. Keenan would like to see them, we'd be more than happy to show them to him. I'd like to meet him personally. You're such a big shot, Mr. Keenan. Why don't you fly to Chicago? I'll meet you. Or are you persona non grata in this country? Call any time, Keenan. 312-544-0134. When you've got the guts to do so. I don't think you do. Matter of fact, there's a lot of people that know you don't have the guts. Misunderstand something, folks. Mr. Keenan is a shameless promoter of himself. He only knows how to keep telling a storyline, which, though he may think he's got it memorized pretty well, the storyline changes quite a bit, and he's not that good of a liar. Everyone knows the old adage, if you tell a lie long enough, loud enough, and hard enough, people will eventually start to believe you. Problem is, you have to keep the story straight. When you're stating facts, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing you have to remember, so the story never changes. Now we're going to get back to this lying gestures thing. I wanted to explain that to you and recap that. There are a couple of different lying gestures, and when you see them on the screen, you're going to understand what you're looking at, which is a fraud. Before we get to that, I'd like to talk about another recent development that just happened regarding Mr. Michael Henry Dunn. You know, Mr. Dunn was on a wonderful excursion to Indonesia on Gene Haynes' dime. And I can find the MasterCard receipts for that. And he was paid his airfare, which he only claims he went to Australia. And 2 months' rent in an apartment hotel by Gene Haynes. But he came onto the blog, the YouTube blog, and he made a statement. And I'm going to bring that up for you, and I'm going to read some of this statement to you. Very interesting. I want you to notice how these people operate. This man is an alleged professor, a PhD of some sort. He also claims to be an actor. I want you to see what kind of ripoff this guy is. You're going to understand that in a second. Quote. This is in retort to our preface to part 2 of this report. This is Michael Henry Dunn. This is to serve notice that illegal false defamation is a crime, and that I reserve the right to pursue legal action against the creators of this video. This guy, excuse me, I'm going to break away. This guy doesn't have enough nickels to rub together to mount that. But even if he does, he's got to prove damages. Fiscal damages. He doesn't make enough. I demand the immediate retraction of these accusations. No evidence is provided of this false accusation. In December of 2012, I was asked by Gene Haynes to create a video to accompany an announcement by Needle Keenan. I wrote, edited, and produced that video. and submitted an invoice to her for $2,000, which was paid. You darn right. You darn right. He goes on. Later that month, Miss Haynes asked me to research and write an in-depth preface to accompany the Keenan lawsuit so that the bigger picture of the accounts could be made clear to a court. What business does this man have writing a preface to a lawsuit? He goes on. I consulted with a lawyer. Well, that would be a good thing to do. As to the appropriate hourly fee for such work. This man posed himself as a paralegal, and Jean Haynes allowed it, and she paid a fee to this guy? Jean agreed to that rate, he goes on, and approved the subsequent work, which was completed on time as requested. I have emails confirming this transaction. You can send them to Mr. Sidler. I'd like to see it. Mr. Dunn, that's B. Sidler at thecritical-post.com. That's B. Sidler, B-S-I-D-L-E-R at thecritical-post.com. Send the receipts. And send the preface, too. We'd like to read it. The invoice was paid, minus the cost of round-trip airfare to Australia, which was arranged by Miss Haynes as a convenience. Now, why would this guy have to go to Australia? What was that all about? You want to explain that, Mr. Dunn? A convenience? We've got all the recordings with you on it too, Mr. Dunn. I've been listening to you. Then he goes on, he says, I was subsequently never paid any amount again by Ms. Haynes. My airfare to Indonesia and my hotel was covered during my stay there from March 1st to May 1st. And he goes on. You know, Mr. Dunn, I want to make something very clear if you happen to be watching. Paul Collin asserted, and Jean Haynes reprinted on her blog, something that I said we suspected you to be the ghostwriter for financial tyranny. Did you listen to the video very carefully, Mr. Dunn? We suspected. But let me play it for you, in case you forgot. Let me play it for everybody else. Here's that clip. It's already queued up. Let's listen.
Isn't it interesting, ladies and gentlemen, that they did in fact find their ghostwriter? His name is David Wilcock, aided in part by another one duped into the operation, one Michael Henry Dunn, who is probably the actual ghostwriter we suspect.
Probably the actual ghostwriter we suspect. Did you hear that? I'm going to play it again. Let's listen to it again.
Events laced with a few facts sprinkled in for good measure. Isn't it interesting, ladies and gentlemen, that they did in fact find their ghostwriter? His name is David Wilcock, aided in part by another one duped into the operation, one Michael Henry Dunn, who is probably the actual ghostwriter we suspect for Wilcock.
Probably the actual ghostwriter for Wilcock, we suspect. There's a reason I use the word suspect. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, when you're dealing with people like this, people who pose as, you know, learned professionals in the alternative media, when you deal with this stuff, you have to be extremely discerning as to who the heck you're going to listen to, which is why this whole thing is such a problem, because a lot of people are losing money based on a bunch of false claims made by alternative media personalities that have no business making these claims because their research is incorrect and they're dealing with a fraud who they're giving a platform to. Now, Mr. Dunn may be unwitting, gullible, stupid, but that doesn't mean he has malice of forethought. But I gotta tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if you saw the video that Mr. Dunn produced for $2,000, I can tell you that I know people who do it for $100. Using those lugubrious tones and the faux English accent. I mean, what a ridiculous piece of tripe trumpeting this Neil Keenan. Or posing as a paralegal. I'd like to see that invoice. What kind of person does this? Exactly what kind of a person has the conscience to do that? Even if they are gullible. The guy was looking to make a buck. So to be clear, Keenan is the fraud. Dunn is just pretty gullible, like I said. Like Wilcock. If Mr. Dunn didn't want any taint of Mr. Keenan's growing web infamy or poor reputation as being a fraud, and that we assert Mr. Keenan's a fraud, if he didn't want this taint on his person, perhaps he should have been more circumspect about who he was doing business with, especially when you're talking about things that the CIA is in charge of. Now you're getting into some pretty tall grass, and you better know what you're doing there, because the CIA and every other secret service agency across the face of the globe are experts at this stuff, and they could twist a person into knots. But Mr. Dunn didn't use that kind of caution. All right. So let's listen to what Keenan said about Michael Henry Dunn, being such a good guy. Let's listen. It starts at 7:22. All right, here we go.
The timeline again is off, really off.
We'll get to it in a second.
Because Michael Dunn actually helped Paul Collins out in California when Paul didn't have a dime, couldn't pay his phone bill, and he wanted a sandwich. I called Michael up and asked him to give Paul a hand. Paul went to see him. Michael
Paul
took care
went to
of that.
see him
And his phone.
in his phone.
Paid his phone.
Did you see how that happened? Did you watch that? In his phone. Did you see the body language there? But let's listen to it again. Let's listen to it again, ladies and gentlemen. You know, because Michael Henry Dunn's such a great guy. Here it is.
Michael Dunn actually helped Paul out, Paul Collins out in California when Paul didn't have a dime, couldn't pay his phone bill, and he wanted a sandwich. I called Michael up and asked him to give Paul a hand. Paul went to see him. Michael took care of that. And his phone. Paid his phone.
You see how he raised his eyebrows?
A month later or two, Paul needed help on his phone again. Michael told him, Paul, I have my own problems. I can't keep.
I mimicked it in the first time I played the clip. Watch it again.
Michael Dunn actually helped Paul out, Paul Collins out in California when Paul didn't have a dime, couldn't pay his phone bill, and he wanted a sandwich. I called Michael up and asked him to give Paul a hand. Paul went to see him. Michael took care of that. And his phone. Paid his phone. A few weeks later, a month later or two, Paul needed help on his phone again. Michael told him, Paul, I have my own problems. I can't keep doing this for you. So Paul drove to the East Coast and came.
Ladies and gentlemen, I had to break away and interrupt the original cut because I actually missed making the point that I was going to before I made the other points. And that was that Keenan said that Mr. Michael Henry Dunn went to meet Paul Collin. But I guess he didn't have his facts straight, or he forgot, or he was just making it up. You know, thinking on his feet, which he might be good at in another day and time, but I guess he's losing his grip. Because in the video YouTube blog, waiting in our comments section, and I'm going to let it go through. By the way, Mr. Dunn, we're going to put that out there. It states there, and I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to bring it into focus here. I never met with Paul Collin. This is a quote. Mr. Keenan told me Paul was a good guy who had helped him and who was down and out in the streets of L.A. He suggested I reach out to him if I could. I had an email exchange with Paul Collin about the possibility of meeting, but it fell through. We never met, nor did we ever exchange any information regarding the accounts or Neil's work. Well, more's the pity. That's the guy you should have been talking to. Because if you had talked to Paul Collin, you wouldn't have gotten involved with this man. And I can tell you, Mr. Dunn, that at this point in time, Mr. Collin's a friend of mine. And I don't mind if anybody else knows it. I'm honored to know this man. The scholarship that you have and all the posing that you do with all that scholarship isn't enough to shine Paul Collin's shoes. It's that simple. We'll take you back to the video now from the original cut. I can only take so much of it, ladies and gentlemen. So you see, we're glad that Michael Dunn helped clear us up. He didn't write the book, Financial Tyranny. But he did call himself Keenan's communication director for Group K at one point. And we have a recording of that proclamation in a recorded Skype conversation with Gene Haynes. But he also admits it in his statement that he makes on the YouTube. Let me read that to you. Where does it say? There it was. Yep. Mr. Keenan made clear to me, quote, this is a quote, Mr. Keenan made clear to me that my work as communications director for the Keenan Group would only be compensated upon receipt of major funds by Group K. Well, so Michael Henry done bit the bait on that one. Isn't that interesting? But we're glad he cleared that up. He's not the ghostwriter financial tyranny. David Wilcock did that all on his own because he's such a hard worker and he does such good research. So I'm going to play you another clip of Keenan. Very interesting clip of Mr. Keenan about the timeline of the writing of the book. Watch this. Let me cue it up here. It starts at 10:42. There we are. Listen closely.
And I told him, look, I'll take you to Indonesia with me. Before I learned he didn't.
Let me get some more context in there.
You know, when Paul didn't have his passport and they were threatening to kill him all throughout the United States, that's when I spoke to Paul. This is within the last year maybe. And I told him, look, I'll take you to Indonesia with me. Before I learned he didn't have a passport. I'll take you to Indonesia with me. You can come over there. And we're writing a little book there for the stores there. We have to do it in English, then we're going to get it translated into Bahasa.
All right. Did you hear that?
When I spoke to Paul, this is within the last year maybe.
Within the last year maybe. Right? One more time.
Throughout the United States. That's when I spoke to Paul. This is within the last year maybe.
Within the last year. He spoke to Paul Collins within the last year maybe. That's what he said. This man can't keep his story straight. Let me play something for you regarding that, because I called Paul last night and asked him this question.
Sure, go ahead.
In Keenan's video that he posted last night,
Yeah.
he said he talked to you within the last year or so about bringing you to Indonesia. Is that true?
No, that's not true at all. Absolutely
all right,
not.
Want to hear it again?
Sure, go ahead.
In Keenan's video that he posted last night,
Yeah.
he said he talked to you within the last year or so about bringing you to Indonesia. Is that true?
No, that's not true at all.
Ladies and gentlemen, this man, he talks about not being able to keep his, Paul not being able to keep his story straight earlier on in this video. But I think that Mr. Keenan ought to look in the mirror because he's the one that can't keep his story straight. I want to show you, excuse me, I brought something into the interface. I actually wanted to bring this back into the interface. Let me show you something from, let's see. From Paul's email archives. Okay. Now, Keenan is talking about bringing Paul to Indonesia last year sometime about a different book. He's not a very good liar. This particular email is dated Saturday, 28th of August, 2010. And it goes down to the bottom. He talks about, some bonds and stuff like that because, you see, that's what he does. He turns over fake bonds. That's what he does. I'll speak about that market in part 2, because there's a market for him. That's why he's talking about deals when I played that other clip earlier. I'm going to leave that aside right now. This is on the 28th of August, 2010, not last year. Quote, I will contact you soon. Paul, others have already requested book rights to this. Do you think you can do a good job at this? Did David Wilcock pay Keenan for the book rights to this little excursion? I wonder. Maybe Mr. Wilcock would like to call 312-544-0134 and answer that question. Anyways, he goes on, quote, if so, when it is over with, I will work with you on the story. I need a ghostwriter if this can be you. Do not worry, I will find ways to make this work for you. Unquote. And I used that in the last video, and here it is. I mean, you can't maybe see it as good as you want, but if you want a copy, I can forward it to anybody who wants it. Okay? Amazing stuff, ladies and gentlemen. But we're going to get back to the video. I want to now come back to the point about the face touching gestures, which I prefaced earlier. Watch.
And I told him, look, I'll take you to Indonesia with me. Before I learned he didn't have a passport. I'll take you to Indonesia with me. You can come over there. And we're writing a little book there for the stores there. We have to do it in English, then we're going to get it translated into Bahasa.
Did you see that? The little searching for words and using his hands and then coming up to his face and doing this. Did you see that? Let's watch it again.
And I told him, look, I'll take you to Indonesia with me. Before I learned he didn't have a passport. I'll take you to Indonesia with me. You can come over there. And we're writing a little book there for the stores there. We have to do it in English, then we're going to get it translated into Bahasa. And Paul made it clear he couldn't come.
Now, if you go and you look up body language and you look up facial touching, there are two telltale signs. One's called the mouth guard and one's called nose touching and eye rub. The mouth guard is one of the few adult gestures. This is from the website indiabix.com/body-languages/hand-to-hand face gestures. The mouth guard is one of the few adult gestures as obvious as a child's. The hand covers the mouth and the thumb is pressed against the cheek as the brain subconsciously instructs it to try and suppress the deceitful words that are being said. Sometimes this gesture may only be several fingers over the mouth or even a closed fist, but its meaning remains the same. That's the first paragraph. In the nose touch gesture, in essence, the nose touch gesture is a sophisticated, disguised version of the mouth guard gesture. It may consist of several slight little rubs below the nose, or it may be one quick, almost imperceptible touch. Like the mouth guard gesture, it can be used both by the speaker to disguise his own deceit and by the listener who doubts the speaker's words. Watch this, ladies and gentlemen.
Nothing to do with financial tyranny. Had to do with a little book for an Indonesian market that was going to be talking about Nelu and others there. It was going to help out in breaking the things out on that side. Now, Paul,
did you see that? Now, you got to understand something, ladies and gentlemen. This man is a professional salesman. He knows how to stand on his feet. And, you know, as they say in Irish, he's got the gift of the blarney. But that doesn't make him a world savior. Let's watch it again.
You're talking about Nelu and others there. It was going to help out in breaking the things out on that side. Now,
See it?
Paul, you're way out of.
He's collecting himself.
Going to help out in breaking the things out on that side. Now, Paul, you're way out of line.
I don't know what else to tell you, ladies and gentlemen. You can't listen to the man's words. He's a promoter. He's a salesman. Now, not all salesmen are bad. Some salesmen are actually very good. But sales can be used in two different ways, and it's a double-edged sword. But this man's been a salesman his entire life, and we've got evidence of that. Ladies and gentlemen, Neil Keenan can only attack Paul Collin because Paul Collin is surprising him. Keenan has actually been schooled by Keith Scott. We have evidence of that. But you see, Collin kept on surprising him because Collin was talking to the Critical Post Chicago. And Keenan couldn't believe it because he gave Collin money. But you can't buy him. He'd just as soon starve. But he was being schooled by Keith Scott. See? That's how he got into this whole bond thing. Take a look at this. This is a email that was from Keith Francis Scott to Gene Haynes on the 28th of August, 2012. Well, how's that for synchronicity, David Wilcock? Paul Collin was contacted about doing a book in August 28, 2010. And on August 28, 2012, Gene Haynes gets a letter from Keith Scott talking about how he schooled Neil Keenan. There's some synchronicity for you there. Why don't you tell Mr. Wilcock about synchronicity and how important it is? Here's the quote, because I'm not going to read this whole letter. I supported Keenan as a friend and mentor, unpaid at my own expense for 18 months. I met Keenan when he was attacking me, claiming that I was using an alias of David Sale, and this was not the truth. Well, we can't attest to the veracity of whether Mr. Keith Scott is telling the truth, because we know he's also one of the fraudsters. But we also know, and I have it on record in a recorded conversation with Paul Collin, that David Sale was somebody that was introduced, according to what Mr. Collin understands. Maybe Mr. Keenan can explain this, that his wife Sonia, who worked at the Duma in Bulgaria, introduced David Sale in a meeting to Neil Keenan. And I have that on recorded conversation. Now, I don't know how Paul can corroborate that, but if Paul makes a statement like that about something that important, I'll bet you he can corroborate it. I'll dig that up possibly for part 2. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Collin has been following this for quite some time. There'll be more from the conversation regarding Keith Scott and Neil Keenan's partnership. And we recorded that on the 24th of November, 2014 with Paul, when we were still calling him Charlie. There's many more conversations that we've had with Paul since then. And I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, nobody that we're aware of that has contacted this number, 312-544-0134, nobody knows this material better than Paul Collin. If there is somebody that understands how the counterfeit bond market and the legacy high-value banking instrument market works better than Paul Collin, I would like that person to call our phone number. Nobody knows it better than Paul Collin that I know. And he called here. And it doesn't matter, ladies and gentlemen, how much money Paul Collin has. It doesn't matter how poor he is. It's hard to make money with information like Mr. Collin has, because there's only a select market of people that would be interested in it. And he's not tapped into that market. Tom Perkins didn't thank him with a monetary gift after Tom Perkins got saved by Paul Collin's information. You know, the guy with the Maltese Falcon yacht saw the information on one of the forums that Paul was on, that his due diligence people didn't know what they were doing. I hope Mr. Perkin fired those guys. Paul Collins saved that man the money. Tom Perkins can just, drop a dime, $50,000 on Paul Collins in 2 seconds flat and not feel it. But you see, he must be one cheap son of a gun. The guy that helped finance Google. So, I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that without Paul Collins' dossier and understanding of this world of deceit, none of the facts could be known. He certainly does deserve to be supported. So if Keenan's got a problem with that, because he couldn't inveigle Paul into something that he wanted him to do to help him perpetrate the fraud that he is perpetrating on all the people out there that he has taken money from, Paul wouldn't cooperate with that. Paul didn't give him as much information as he is conflating. I saw the emails, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot to this sordid yarn, ladies and gentlemen, and it's slow going. Very slow going. I got a lot to listen to. I got a lot to look at. A lot to read. I had no idea the amount of information. But when we're done, if you're still convinced Neil Keenan is going to save the world, I don't know what to do about that. But good luck with that. If I were you, and I'm telling everybody who's listening to this man, don't give this guy another dime, because you'll never see it again. It's a warning. And he can come on this show anytime he wants and explain to me and our investigators exactly what he's going to do. And since he's already found gold, he says, we're going to bring up that video in part 2. Well, he should be sitting on a couple of nickels. Why does he need financing for something? He's always looking for financing. But we'll get into that also. Thanks again for indulging us, folks. We'll get this done as soon as possible. And we appreciate you spending your time at the Critical Post Chicago. For those of you who are interested, there is a certain market that's interested in this story. And I apologize for even having to go through it. Like I said, we dropped it a couple of years ago. But again, thanks for your indulgence and visiting the Critical Post Chicago. Again, my name is Scott Pollock, Chief Editor of the Critical Post Chicago Reporting. We'll be back as soon as possible with the conclusion to all of this. That is all.